Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So today we're continuing this series, the Unported playlist, where I take a look at my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today we have a little bit of a mixed bag because we are playing the System 23 version of Time Crisis 2. While this game definitely came out on PlayStation 2, it wasn't really a port, it was a complete remake of the game with brand new graphics, which while good, are not as charming as the arcade original. So the arcade version of the game, in my opinion, still remains quote-unquote unported with a big old asterisk next to the side. And you know me, at this point in time on Unported Playlist, I kind of make whatever I want, so you guys are just going to have to hang with it. But when I say Time Crisis 2 is one of the best light gun shooters ever made, and Namco at their best, I 100% mean it. It is just one of those games, if you played it back in the day, you probably fell in love with it, and it's still as much fun today as it was back in the 90s. Before I get too much further involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But the original Time Crisis was absolutely an amazing game, and Time Crisis 2 basically took that entire formula and just made it that much bigger, because this runs on the System 23 board versus the System 22, so you're getting more intense action, you're getting better graphics, but you're still getting that classic 90s arcade look versus the PlayStation 2. And again, I still love the PlayStation 2 version of the game, and I play it all the time on my PVM, but I just love the look of the arcade original that much better. There's something about the blocky graphics, the chunky pixels, that just 100% work. And now that this game can be played from start to finish in MAME with very few graphical glitches, it is a version of the game I recommend you play even if you have played the PlayStation 2 original. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, have you ever played Time Crisis 2? I'm assuming most people have. But it is one of those things, every once in a while I'll get a comment saying, I've never played this before, I should check it out, and I'm always surprised by that. And I would say, as far as the arcade original is concerned, the overall colors are just more vibrant and just have more of an arcadey feel to them. And again, I'm not really crapping on the PlayStation 2 version here. It is a fun one, but I've never really been a fan of PlayStation 2 graphics as far as that generation is concerned. Dreamcast, stuff like Xbox, GameCube always had a cleaner, more appealing look to me. And trust me, I have every single PlayStation from the original all the way up to PS5 right now, so I've definitely been a fan of PlayStation for a long time. But again, this game just looks so amazing on the System 23, and the gameplay 100% matches it. This initial level from start to finish is just a straight up 10 out of 10 Hall of Fame first ballot level of arcade fun. Running up the hill, having the barrels fall down at you, having this giant troop transport come in trying to blow you up. The pacing from the beginning of when you hit start to the end of stage 1 is just absolutely amazing. And if there's quote unquote perfect levels in video games, the first stage of Time Crisis 2 would be very high on my list. There's absolutely nothing that it does wrong. If you think about it this way, we don't get a ton of modern light gun games. I still think the golden era of this genre was the mid to late 90s into like the early 2000s, where Sega was making them, Namco was making them, Konami was making them. Basically everyone wanted a light gun hit, and everyone was competing with themselves to try to one up the other, because a lot of what Time Crisis 2 is set piece. You'll have a very quiet kind of opening. Sure, you're running up a hill and it's action packed, you're pretty stable, but then when you get to the boss fight, suddenly you're running down what seems like an Italian canal with the boss with 2 Gatling guns off the back of a boat. You're going to be shooting scuba divers, you're going to be shooting dudes on jet skis, the screen is going to be swaying back and forth, and you're going to have to be very good with your aim. But when you're clicking with this game, when your aim is true, you just feel like an absolute badass action movie hero, and that is what games like Time Crisis did. They basically brought you into an action movie, handed you a plastic peripheral that felt like you were shooting at something, and just said to yourself, go ahead and be the hero, we're here to make it happen. And that's why games like Time Crisis, The House of the Dead, Virtual Cop have always felt so amazing. It kind of satisfies that power fantasy of being the action movie hero who can gun down an entire army just with a handgun. And when it looks and sounds as good as something like Time Crisis 2, you have a recipe for an absolute classic arcade game if there ever was one. Because I did say sounds, it's time for the soundtrack sample. 45 seconds, but come back because I got a lot more history about the game, but enjoy.
Look over there. Let's go! Oh! There! Go, go, go! Action! Halt!
One of the things about the Time Crisis franchise, and Time Crisis 2 in specific, that I don't feel like enough people mention is just how incredibly good the soundtrack is. We talk about stuff like the soundtrack to Virtual Cop and The House of the Dead, like it's some of the best video game music ever made, and that is true, but the overall sweeping orchestral nature of the music in the Time Crisis franchise is every bit as good as anything Sega ever did. And honestly, if I'm being truthful with you, if I had to say Virtual Cop 1 and 2 versus Time Crisis and Time Crisis 2, I am on Namco's side of things here, and that is something that I just never expect myself to say because I am a huge Sega fan, but I try to be objective about the games and say which one I think does it the best, and definitely Time Crisis is my pick, and it kind of makes me wonder why Namco didn't kind of wade more into the horror genre with their light gun games. I would have loved to have seen a horror-based Time Crisis. Maybe there's a zombie outbreak, maybe there's something else going on, but imagine Time Crisis with a full horror conversion. That would have definitely been something I would have gravitated towards, because in the light gun genre, the horror elements are my favorite. The House of the Dead, Evil Knight, games like Beastbuster Second Nightmare, that's what 100% I just want to play more of, and I would have loved to have seen a horror crisis. Maybe even call it Zombie Crisis, and we're just kind of done. But as we move on to this train piece here, every single level is just an action set piece come to life. Think about how many different action movies have taken places on trains. They're basically just going down the tracks, and there's a gigantic gunfight, and that is what you see here in Time Crisis. And all of the bosses are hilarious action movie tropes in the best ways possible, and all of the voice acting is just good enough to understand what it's saying, and just janky enough to laugh at it. And that kind of is the perfect recipe for a perfect arcade game. You want like 10% jank, that kind of cheesy flavor going on, but you want all of the gameplay to be so good. And of course, if you have two boards, you network these things up, or you have two PlayStation 2 GunCons, then you can play the alternate route, because you'll see your partner basically on screen half of the game, and a lot of times you will branch off from where they are going. So if you're the second player, you basically get to play the exact same game, but from a completely different angle, and you're going to get some different set pieces depending on what you're looking at. And I think that is a really good thing, not just for the arcades, so you can kind of get that two-player playability in, but also for replays. You have to play this game at least twice to be able to see the entirety of it. And trust me, trying to get a 1cc on this one is not easy. You can spend a ton of time with it, and it's one of those things. This board is absolutely massive, and it isn't really one that I've wanted to collect just because Namco System 23 boards are absolutely huge. They can be quite temperamental, and wiring them all up is absolutely a chore, but I still think this game just looks that much better than the PlayStation 2 version, even if technically the Namco System 23 isn't going to be able to stand up to the raw horsepower of PlayStation 2, and that is why style and presentation matter so much in games. And don't get me wrong, the PlayStation 2 version isn't ugly. I think it might look a little bit too pretty because it loses a ton of the charm of the original Namco System 23 board, and that's where I first played this game. So if you gave me the choice between this version and the PlayStation 2 version, just based on looks alone, I am going Namco System 23 all day long and twice on Sundays. But you tell me down below again, PlayStation 2 or Namco System 23, what is your vibe? It's time for the second soundtrack sample, because again, the music in this game is a straight 10 out of 10, 35 seconds, and I'll be right back with just a little bit more Time Crisis 2.
Go! Action! Got him! Continue. Got him!
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the music in Time Crisis 2 is perfect, as is the game, and it really makes me think, why did we not get more action movie licensed light gun games back in the day? Why am I not playing a Lethal Weapon game or something like a Dirty Harry game? Think of all those amazing action movies from the 80s and 90s and wonder why more of them didn't get converted into arcade titles with a light gun. Sure, we have stuff like The Terminator, sure we have stuff like Die Hard Arcade, the one that actually had the light gun games in the trilogy, but honestly, there's so many incredible action movies out there that could have been turned into video game properties. I'm assuming it's mostly just because the licensing was too expensive, but imagine a universe where every great action movie had an amazing light gun game made for it, either by Sega, Namco, or Konami. That is just a reality I'd love to live in. And honestly, when we're talking about set pieces, the last boss fight here on this faux satellite is just straight up some of the best arcade light gun gaming you can find. So that is why I love something like Time Crisis 2 so much, why put the arcade original version up on unported playlists. It just looks and feels feels completely different, even if it's the exact same game that got ported to PlayStation 2. But you leave me your thoughts down below. I'm done. Go play this game if you never have, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.